Let's see, what else? My name is Barb Sandwald. I am one of the founders of the Secular Hub and the current chair of the board of directors. I wanted to give a special welcome to all of you, but especially to the first-time visitors. If you're here for the first time and you're willing and able, could you stand or raise your hand and let us know who you are so that we can acknowledge you? Yeah. We're glad to have you here, and we hope that the experience you have here tonight causes you to come back and become part of our community. About 11 years ago, Seth was here to speak at a conference, and what he said really has stuck with me over that time. That was, he was talking about people who remain in their religious communities long past the time that they have given up their religious beliefs because the community is important to them. And the thing he said was that community is not a religious thing, it's a human thing. And that stuck with me because at the time we were in our first years of the Secular Hub and working to build a community that was for non-religious people. So the Secular Hub is meant to be a community center for the non-religious. We have many events going on, social events, science talks, book groups, movie nights, all kinds of stuff going on. Pancake breakfast tomorrow. We have speaker events as we have tonight. And one of the other things of the Secular Hub was, a key thing was to have a physical location. And that allows us to run events, but also to offer our space to groups who we're friends with, our partners. So groups like the Freedom from Religion Foundation Denver chapter, who is co-sponsoring tonight's event. And so Claudette is the person who leads that group, and I wanted to she'll give you a welcome also.
Thank you, Barb. So as Barb said, my name is Claudette St. Pierre, and I'm one of the founders of the Denver chapter of the Freedom from Religion Foundation. We actually were founded about the same time that the Secular Hub was founded. And so we are an affiliate chapter of the national organization based in Madison, Wisconsin, and our mission and purpose is to maintain the separation of religion and government, keep religion out of government, and educate the public about that important aspect of our government, and also to provide community as well. And so we love to partner with the Hub. We have a lot of events here. As a matter of fact, December 20th is our winter solstice event. So you can go to the meetup page, either the Secular Hub meetup or the FFRF meetup. And it should be a great event. It's a really nice community event, a way to celebrate the non-religious aspect of the holidays. So welcome, and thank you everyone for coming. We appreciate you being here, and it's great to have you here.
All right, so I'm sure most of you know Seth and what he does. He is just in case anybody doesn't, he's formerly a Christian radio host, and he wrote this story of leaving religion in his book called Deconversion, which I recommend to you. I see it's over here. I especially like the audiobook version because you get to hear Seth's velvety tones. He is the host of the Thinking Atheist podcast and the online community with the same name, and does also the podcast called True Stories with Seth Andrews. He is the author of 5 books. A couple of them are here tonight. His most recent book is Christianity Made Me Talk Like an Idiot, which is also available tonight. One thing that you might not know about Seth, but I've in my role with the Secular Hub and also when I attend conferences, I sometimes get to talk to the speakers. And some of the speakers who are in their first year or two of being on the speaker circuit have told me how much Seth has helped them. He helps them do better, make connections, and I think that's just more evidence for what a good-hearted human he is. So give a warm welcome to Seth Andrews.
I can't live up to that. Thank you, Barb. All right, can everybody hear the sound of my voice? I'm back here blushing. I'm like, wow, we need Barb to write all my press material because she makes me sound so amazing. Who has never been to the Secular Hub before? Wow. All right, well, they're not paying me to say this. I am a fan of this organization for a lot of reasons, not just because the people who are a part of it have become family over the years, but I'm sick and tired of the church claiming community for itself. It does community very, 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 very well. And a lot of secular groups will sometimes grab the model that they use, some of the agendas and music and some of the other things, because, okay, great, it works. But, community is a human thing. It is something we naturally do and have always done. And that's why we find ourselves grouping by interest. You'll find, bowling night and concerts and people who love specific types of hobbies and movies and all those things. And with secular values, we have that in common. And so Secular Hub provides sort of a point where people, especially I think those who have left a religious community and they feel like that the whole church net's gone, the whole community net is gone with their deconstruction. Secular Hub is a way for them to sort of reconnect with people, but to do so without all the mythology and the dogma and the guilt and the all the baggage type stuff. So anyway, that's my pitch. If you are one of those people that you've raised your hand in the first time here and you're looking for a chance to connect, find out a little more. Just go to their website. And, one of the dreams I had for being here was that people would discover this gem in Denver, Colorado. Speaking of Colorado, my wife, who rarely gets to travel with me, is here. Natalie, wave to everyone. So we had the genius idea that in our 50s, we were going to try snow skiing for the first time. Well, it's been 40 years. I don't remember anything. Everything's creaking, I'm saying? Everything's sore. So why we're going snow skiing, I don't know. And so we get here and we look, and there's God is angry with Breckenridge. Have you noticed? God is angry with I-70. So we've been thinking, what do we do? And we've sort of pushed everything a day, and we're going to try to get out there. But if I was to try to drive I-70 tonight, you natives think I would be stupid. Okay, all right, I need validation. The format is I'd like to just say a few words just to take you on a journey. And then afterwards, we like to say Q&A as if I'm Yoda and have great wisdom for everybody. I do not. Look, I am not that guy. But one thing about doing things at the local level is we can do Q&A together. We can ask questions, make comments, push back. We can ask each other stuff. So I'm going to do maybe 45 minutes. It should go pretty quick, hopefully for you. And then we'll stretch for a second and then spend another half an hour where we just talk with each other. And so if anything sort of sticks in your head you want to talk about, save it, and we'll chat about it here in just a second. Okay. At the beginning of the 20th century, World War I, of course, was raging across Europe's western and parts of Europe's eastern front. Allied forces, of course, facing off against the enemy forces. It was a meat grinder of conflict that we read about all the time in our history books. And in the context of the battlefield, we understand why fighting forces need authority figures, commanders, admirals, generals, sergeants, right? If there weren't firm directives and a hierarchy, a chain of command, it would be chaos. We understand authority in that context. But on one cold December night in 1914, miserable soldiers in opposing trenches stopped listening to authority and instead they listened to each other and to themselves. This became an encounter that historians talk about well over 100 years later. Is there such a thing as a war story about love? Now, the word empathy is probably the better term in the context I'm going to use it. Empathy, human empathy. But I like the way love rolls off the tongue, so I'm going to kind of use that word instead, okay? And before my presentation is over today, you might just leave with a little bit of hope, and don't we need hope in this day and age? Does anybody else wake up in the morning and you're afraid to log on to the world? Damage report. What fresh hell awaits me today? What new bottom are we going to see today? Oh, my God. You know, we've had to talk about partitioning our social media time, but it's a catch-22 because it's driving me crazy, and the human brain is not processing the fire hose of information because we're not wired for it, but I don't want to be uninformed, and something must have happened today, and I just pendulum swing back and forth. And back and forth. Okay, I recently released a speech to YouTube. You may have seen it. It's about the tendency of human beings to respond to authority figures. Specifically, I'm interested in the response to authoritarian figures, power players who will come in and tell us who to love, who to hate, who to support, who to oppose, who to help, and who to harm. You guys seen this graphic flying around online? The people don't know their true power, and it shows the majority here, and they propped up the one guy on the end, right? I'm interested in how a majority, often representing tens or even tens of millions of people, may not realize they have power. The power to push back, to criticize, to dissent, to say no. And man, when we surrender that power, bad things go down. The late British philosopher Bertrand Russell wrote back in 1903 that if power is bad, as it seems to be, let us reject it from our hearts. In this lies man's true freedom, in determination to worship only the God created by our own love of the good. Now, before I get to the war story about love, I want to cover some familiar territory for most of you. This is an educated audience, but I'm leading toward a point, so indulge me. I mentioned as well in my last presentation the authoritarian Benito Mussolini, called the founder of Italian fascism. He engaged in a power grab way back in 1922. He was imposing, he was charismatic, he assembled disgruntled politicians and anarchists and discontent power players, and he pledged himself to establish a new political entity. It was called the Fasci Italiani di Combattimento, which means Italian fighting bands. Now check the word fasci. That is drawn from the ancient word fascio, which was an ancient symbol of authority. It's the axe supported by and empowered by sticks that were wrapped around the handle. Guess who got to be the axe, right? Mussolini. He rose to power on this platform. I will remove the undesirables and I will restore this country to greatness. And does that sound familiar? All I need is unchecked power. I alone can fix it. It would take many, many, many years and millions of death before his many millions of years. Wait, whoa, no. Well, I just had a mild stroke on stage. Giving this speech in an alternate universe. It would take many years and millions of lives lost before people finally did rise up. His authoritarian rule did end in disgrace, defeat, and ultimately his own horrible execution. But I want to come back to the symbol, the fascist symbol, right? Got the axe, and you've got the sticks that are propping it up. This represented the authority to rule, reward, and even punish. And it's been used in various cultures throughout the centuries with different meanings attached to it. There's a whole lot of interpretations, right? Domination or liberation. You might be surprised to see that this symbol is on display in our own congressional halls. It is said in that context to signify the power of democratic states to fortify when we are united together. But I'm kind of creeped out. That this is the symbol that we have hanging, right? It's supposed to represent the power and the authority of the United States House of Representatives. And there are important discussions about whether there are better symbols. But how many axes throughout human history have been propped up by everyday people? Stalin's another easy one. For decades, he rained terror upon the Russian people, and he did the same thing. He preached about the enemy from within, those dangerous traitors. He had people tried, quote unquote, tried and executed. He was responsible for the death of millions of people. He was an absolute authority with a capital A. And yet at the time, over 180 million Russian citizens were there, and Stalin was just one man. And I find that interesting. Kim Il-sung, he's founder of North Korea. He remains an authoritarian even though he's dead. As the late Christopher Hitchens pointed out, his dynasty was and is treated as divine. He is part of a godhead. Watch the citizens in North Korea bow down at the feet of the giant effigies of Kim Il-sung and Kim Jong-il. Notice how these things are constructed, how huge they are. They tower over the tiny commoners. Intimidation is built into the authoritarian model. And the tiny commoners, the sticks, are down there in their shadow. This is no accident. There is no escaping their all-seeing eyes. In the walls of private homes in North Korea, people are required by law to display portraits of the dear leader in their houses. And they might get a surprise inspection where the military shows up and white gloves them to make sure that they are not poorly aligned or not covered in dust. You must pay homage to the gods. 26 million North Koreans right now living in fear for their lives every day. And I have to imagine what it might be like if they woke from their slumber to rise up and join humanity beyond the guard towers, barbed wires, and concentration camps. Now, I understand the power of brainwashing. I understand militarization. They do not have access to the weaponry. They don't have access to the infrastructure. Many are looking literally down the barrel of a gun. So it does sound very pie in the sky to say, wow, I wish they could all be free. It's not that simple. But if we look at it on the macro stage, I think, what if? What if? And I think that's a valid question. From the Ayatollahs to the popes to the cult leaders to the corner preachers, the few have somehow directed the many over and over and over again. But there have been people who have pushed back or at least been very unhappy about it. I think about the rank-and-file Russian soldiers who were part of the Ukraine invasion. They don't give a rat's ass if Putin gets more real estate, right? They don't have a dog in that fight. They don't care. Maybe there's a few true believers, but how many of these guys are literally under Putin's gun? What if even half of the 700,000 deployed soldiers in Ukraine, Russian soldiers, buck the system that threatened to kill them and the Ukrainians? Even the over 60 to 70% of Russian citizens who, at least in polls, say they support Putin's mission in Ukraine, his assault, his invasion, they say they don't really understand what Putin's goals actually are. We just think, he's the leader, it's his thing, we follow him. Imagine if they put down their national flags and they stopped following the God King, and they actually met the men, women, and children that were being targeted by Russian bullets and bombs, by the millions. Could they not stand up and demand an end to the madness? I do fantasize about those types of things. We know that at least 10,000 Russians in uniform have tried to desert because of Ukraine. The courts are packed with cases against AWOLs. Morale on the ground stinks. It's terrible. They feel trapped under one man's rule. One man supported by a few men who are then supported by a great many. Do the people understand their true power? Especially when our favorite stories are stories of rebellion. I mean, what's the easiest example? Star Wars. Who were the heroes in Star Wars? You know, who was the emperor always cursing? He was the rebellion, the rebellion. He was always bitching about the rebellion. The rebels were the heroes. They were the good guys we were rooting for. The plucky underdogs rising up against the evil, unlimited power. I have to wonder what the Death Star staffers were saying at the water cooler when, you know, all this shit was going down. They're sitting in there going, oh, God, he wants to blow up Alderaan. He wants to, you know, he wants to take over another planet, and the rebels are planning something. I just know it. And, you know, they're going to find a way to fly a TIE fighter down into the middle of this thing, and we're all screwed. Oh, God. But, you know, I can't get a job anywhere else. And what else are we going to do, right? It's not like we have the weaponry to push back. We'll just see what happens. Pass the salt, right? I mean, that's kind of what I'm thinking the stormtroopers are doing, right? Maybe some people were bowing in fear because it was a survival thing. Some shrugged, looked the other way. Some would rather be a pet than cattle, right? I'd rather be a servant than a slave if there is a difference. So they accept a leash. Some are maybe impressed by authoritarian power. You know what? If you're that good, if you're that strong, if you're that unstoppable, my money's on you. I'm team you. Some may be social Darwinists. If you can be the victor, you deserve the spoils. Social Darwinism. This is a bad riff on natural selection and survival of the fittest. The thinking is that the weak are simply being filtered out of the societal gene pool. The weak are a drain and they're a distraction and pathetic and pretty much just in the way. So, evolutionarily, the weak should be crushed by the strong because we'll all be stronger in the end. That's the idea. It means they have no idea what evolution actually is or what the fittest actually means in the terms of evolution. This country has long romanticized people like this guy. World War II's General George Patton. This guy kicked ass and he took names. He walked the lines with these ivory-handled pistols. You guys ever see those photos from the history books? In March of 1945 at the Rhine River in Germany, he took time to urinate in the water, marking territory. The winners piss on the losers. Now, given the Nazi threat and everything that we've been through, I'm not saying this gesture was right or wrong. I'm not making a commentary about that. But I'm interested in Patton as the man, the marking of territory, this sort of alpha male bravado. He was problematic, right? In his eyes and his mind, compassion, consideration, empathy were weakness. As portrayed in the famous George C. Scott movie, Patton slapped a couple of shell-shocked officers. He did not believe in PTSD. He didn't think trauma or breakdown due to war was a thing. He saw losers. Now, those slaps cost him a rebuke from President Eisenhower at the time, and it damaged his career to an extent. But I can think of a lot of people right now who, if you bring up Patton's name, will be like, yeah, I admire that guy. Suck it up, snowflake, right? Suck it up. Be a man. What's the matter with you? How come you're crying? No empathy, no understanding, and no real knowledge about what trauma can do to the human mind and heart. Many of us had real concerns about social Darwinism when Donald Trump tweeted this back in 2025. He said, "Only the weak will fail." Now, I'm not a Christian myself, but I have to ask how this jives with the best teachings of Jesus Christ. And I think that's a fair question. It's a question that many of my Christian allies have been asking, and I appreciate them for doing so. Be devoted to one another in love. Honor one another above yourselves. In everything give thanks. God is love. Let all that you do be done in love. Blessed are the meek, Be kind to one another, tender-hearted, forgiving one another. Be quick to hear, slow to speak, slow to anger. And there are others. You know, a soft answer turns away wrath. Proverbs 15. Don't take revenge. Romans 12. Don't love money. 1 Timothy 6:10. Be humble and gentle. Don't lie. And on and on and on. Don't bully. Don't lust. Don't cheat on your spouse. Don't steal, etc. If we don't lead with love, then we easily become a culture of the cruel. Cruelty, callous indifference to or pleasure in causing pain and suffering. Psychologist and journalist Brian Resnick sums it up like this. He said, dehumanization is a mental loophole that lets us harm other people. This is a minute-by-minute headline today, is it not? How often have we seen our fellow human beings dehumanized to justify their mistreatment? How many authoritarians have set false narratives about them and demanded their mistreatment? In the eyes of the dismissive and the cold and the bigoted and cruel, immigrants are not human beings, often escaping great suffering and danger. They are instead vilified because they're parasites, they're pushers, predators, garbage, right? What he said about the Somali immigrants. All Somali immigrants. Crazy. Many churches are thankfully an open tent for people of all orientations, but in fundamentalist circles, gay people are still sodomites deemed wicked by both God and man. Trans people, they've become the villain of the day, haven't they? They're not good people trying to navigate their own complex gender journey with authenticity and safety, just trying to be happy and live. They're bathroom stalkers targeting our children. Murdered school children are ignored while AR-15s are protected. The poor are too weak and pathetic to not be poor. Christians own and wave a Bible that says, show hospitality to the stranger, give justice to the foreigner, act with love, because you never know when you might be entertaining angels. And many hold to those convictions, but a terrifying many do not. Now, you and I will usually instinctively favor our own tribe first. And this is reasonable, it's understandable, given that we are evolved creatures, right? It's a reflection of our evolution. We favor our in-group, and then we're usually at least knee-jerky at the beginning, if not outright distrustful of, we lock out or even destroy out groups. This was an evolutionary thing, right? There was the type 1 and type 2 error. If I see someone on the outside of the tribe, you are an unknown. You might be a friend, but you also might be a threat. So othering you, locking you out, maybe even destroying you is a better way to make sure that I survive long enough to pass on my genes. Primitive, but of course, pretty effective. In-groups also made us more efficient. We could procure more, we could grow more, we could accomplish more. Potential enemies who might come after one of us would think twice before they came after the tribe. And of course, the bigger and stronger we were as a tribe, the more we could use that power for our own gain. So tribalism is a thing, not always good. I mean, sometimes it can be a good thing. We're surrounded by it. One of the more recreational examples I like to use is sports teams. You guys have the Broncos here. Any football people in this town? I'm thinking it's a football town. Okay. Well, this used to be a big rivalry in my home state of Oklahoma. OU, Oklahoma University versus OSU, Oklahoma State. And they had an annual football game showdown that was so hotly anticipated that it was nicknamed Bedlam. The Bedlam game's coming up. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. We'd make jokes about the opponents. You gripe about hometown referees, defend the colors, cheer and jeer every play. You know, fans would divide. Tribe 1, Tribe 2. unless an Oklahoma tribe faced off against the Texas tribe. Uh-oh. Now, two former rivals band together as Team One to face off against the evil other that is the greater evil, right? I don't follow football, but I get it. I totally get it. We all have our favorite pastimes, and we cheer our players. And I think sports can be a wonderful distraction. I don't knock sports at all. I enjoy a good football game, you know. But it's still tribalism. By the way, sometimes things can get really intense. I happened upon an ESPN documentary from 2007 about the longtime rivalry between Michigan and Ohio State. Now, I'd been oblivious to these teams hate each other. They hate each other. And because we are tribal, I think, both teams could watch the same game, and I'll bet they'd walk away with a totally different report about how it went down. Same game happened, but they saw something different based on their own biases. Interesting psychology. Here's another one I was like, your band sucks, man. Your style of music, that's terrible, right? Metal's the best. Nah, 80s music's the best, which it is, actually. Indie, classical, country, even sub-tribes, right? Which artist does it better? You know, these are clubs, they're tribes, they're cultures. I mean, what do Taylor Swift fans call themselves? Swifties. They've rallied around a common interest, and there's a sense of family among Taylor Swift fans. And we see in-group solidarity that's based on a person's genre, some kind of rallying point. Here's a fun debate. Are you a DC person or are you a Marvel person? I'm amazed at how these internet fights on this stuff can get downright crazy. I'm like, well, why not both? Like, why does it have to be either or? But okay, fine. What are political parties, if not tribes? This is necessary, I think, because our political affiliation should reflect our values. Like, I myself am a Democrat, and I lean more progressive politically for a reason, and that's simply the best fit. It's not a great fit, but it's the best fit for me. And I think the fact that we are speaking to our values and joining a group or party that might reflect that does have a lot of merit. What are nations, if not tribes? We are the home country. They are the foreigners. I heard Buttigieg say it a great way when he was talking about this whole America First nonsense. And he said what these people really mean is America alone. And I find that tragic, right? Because national interest and often national pride, which can be great, it can in its healthiest sense be great for organization, safety, community, progress. But it can also be isolating and dehumanizing. You know, are we thinking our fellow human beings who live in other countries, or are we thinking the inferior other? How often are national flags more than just benign identifiers? They become these sort of sacred nationalist totems, dividers that keep us away from each other. I'm also interested in who draws the line. Somewhere, somebody subjectively decided, okay, here's the dots, and on this side, you're my people, and if you step 6 feet on that side, you're not. And I think, well, who drew the line? And for what reason? What was their agenda? How many times has the line been moved, right? And you start to see it in that context. It all starts to look so ridiculous. Religions of the world, what are they if not tribes? And they each have their own communities, leaders, ideologies, beliefs, codes of conduct, and authority figures for many of them. Then you can see tribal fragmentation within each religion. We see the splintering, in the U.S. South. You're going to see a lot of Baptist and Pentecostal. Western states lean a little more Catholic. Methodists dominate the middle of the country. Lutherans, Episcopalians, Catholics more up north, right? And you can see splinter tribes inside individual denominational tribes. The Southern Baptists, they've splintered off from the American Baptists who disagree with the Cooperative Baptists, who've been fighting with the Independent Baptists, who don't want anything to do with the Free Will Baptists. Jesus Christ, if you'll pardon the expression. God. The God who was not the author of confusion's looking down going, wow, that didn't work out, right? Right? Don't kid yourselves that atheists are above this kind of tribal superiority, tribal tendencies, superiority complexes. And hopefully I've got enough equity to speak on this subject because I've been doing this a while. But the atheist meme verse, it can be fun. I mean, I share memes all the time, but I try to vet them as best I can because there are some awful ones that have been flying around for freaking ever, and they will not die, right? Othering, dehumanizing, whether it's a Christian or a Muslim or whoever. Let me share just a couple with you. I'm thinking of doing a whole speech on these. I'm trying to decide just how much hate mail I want to get, but let me show you just a couple that make my left eye twitch. Sundays are peaceful because the most evil people are at church. Are you shitting me? Really? Really? I mean, some of the most beautiful people in the world happen to be church-going people. Here's one. Atheist. A, thoughtful, honest, ethical, intelligent, skeptical thinker. Oh, I wish this was always true. Oh, my God. I was in Chicago, my friends. I met a flat earth atheist. Flat earth atheist. My head literally started to just expand like that guy in Big Trouble in Little China when his head almost blew off. It did actually blow up. I almost blew up. I've seen anti-vaccine atheists, homeopathy atheists. The government is hiding little green men, aliens somewhere in the basement, atheists. I swear. And I've seen a lot of tribal atheists who are way too eager to say things that are not just unhelpful and superior, but just factually wrong about their fellow travelers on this planet who may happen to be religious. Now, it's complicated. I know there are some genuinely awful, high-control, toxic religious people out there. I get that. But I also know a ton more who have I think they've evolved their own religion into something much more humanistic and egalitarian and loving, you know. I've heard some people make this connection. Even casual Christians out there still identify as Christians, which means they enable Christian nationalists. Christian nationalism is infected with white supremacy. As such, then, by association with the Nazis, even the most egalitarian, progressive, humanistic Christians, even the most loving Christians are, by association, Nazis. This ignores so many of wonderful Christians that I stand shoulder to shoulder with on a day-to-day basis who have joined the fight for democracy and decency. People like this person. She's a Christian, Amanda Tyler. She's executive director of the Baptist Joint Committee. She founded Christians Against Christian Nationalism. She's on the front lines daily, fighting to protect equality and safety for LGBT people and Americans across the border, across the color and gender and culture spectrum, people from other nations who have immigrated here. I think she may be working outside the Bible, the literal Bible, to practice her evolved faith, but she's religious. She wants the same freaking thing we do. Peace, equality, safety, humanity. I'll take that. Her organization is a very diverse assembling of reverends and pastors and bishops and religious leaders of all stripes. These are good people working alongside us. They want state-church separation. Their deity does not need an American government to be Gilead, right? Fine, they're religious. I have a lot more in common with these people than we have in disagreement. Are they stupid? Are they evil? Are they Nazis? Come on. We have a theological disagreement, and that's a discussion worth having. But more important, we're connected by a shared humanity on the grander stage. This is Pastor John Pavlovitz. He's a Christian. Sometimes he makes me want to put my head through a wall. All right? He's a lovely man who has sided with us extremely for humanity and against the cruelty of this insane administration. But, he'll go online and say something like, well, Jesus never condemned slavery, or the Bible has never condemned LGBT people. And at one point, I think I just had to, I'm like, John, have you read the Old and New Testament? Not just the Old. Have you read the Old and New Testament? You know what I'm saying? Have you actually, have you referenced the Bible that you are talking about today? Because, but okay, fine. He took, an X-Acto knife and he decided, well, the book of Exodus and Leviticus, and I think it was Matthew, or was it Paul who wrote about gays? Okay, fine. He just sort of took white out, if I can date myself, and he took that out of his Bible, and he's going to operate with, okay, I'll take it. I will take that. I will take a cherry picker Christian who wants to be a humanist. I'll take him any day, right? This is Dr. Kristen Dumais. She is a freaking theology professor. She wrote the book called Jesus and John Wayne, and it talks about the evangelical leaning into those John Wayne figures, sort of the hyper-masculine, very basic, binary thinking type thing where men were men and women were women and we wave the flag and America for all and blah, blah, blah. It's a very reductive kind of way of looking at ourselves, especially against the world. And she wrote a book that condemned the white evangelicals that have splintered the United States and betrayed the United States Constitution. She's an amazing woman. What a tragedy, rather, it would be if we outgrouped her. We mark these lines. It's just us and them. And so often we may have a little more in common than we have in disagreement. Tribalism. It can activate the worst angels of our nature, that evolutionary leftover that is a divider. We're human, they are inhuman. Dehumanization, the mental loophole that causes us to harm others. Now, we see militaries do this with the enemy. Shooting, knifing, or bombing an inhuman thing is a hell of a lot easier than doing it to a flesh and blood person. I interviewed this guy. His name is John Musgrave. I saw him featured in Ken Burns' 10-part series about the Vietnam War, which is probably the best chronicling of the Vietnam War that I have ever seen. That and a book called Dispatches by Michael Hurd that was published in 1968 are the two. That's my 1-2 punch for Vietnam. Anyway, John was interviewed, and his whole story is remarkable. He was terribly wounded, shot in the chest, left for dead. Nobody thought he was going to survive, and he did, remained permanently disabled. He was once one of those people who was like, love it or leave it, my country, right or wrong. You're traitors if you were to ever protest the Vietnam War while we're boots on the ground over here fighting for our lives and yours, etc. But after his wounding and after he began to see the injustices that took place, he became part of Vietnam Veterans Against the War, and he marched in the streets with other soldiers to protest the injustice of it all. That's not the part of the story that relates today, but it's part of the story in general. It's worth looking up, right? So he talked about the day he killed his first Vietnamese soldier. He came across some young guy, and the other guy went for his weapon, and John went for his, and John fired first and killed him. And the guy died suffering and then finally expired right in front of him. And John said he could not deal with it. His brain was like a pinball machine of grief and pain and confusion. And he could not process it. But in short order after that happened, he had one of his fellow soldiers who happened to be a friend walked into a minefield, and a mine went up, and he blew his buddy to bits, killed him right there. And he said, once that happened to my friend, I made a deal with the devil, and that was how he said it. He said, I will never kill another human being as long as I'm in Vietnam. However, I will waste as many gooks as I can find. I'll wax as many dinks as I can find. I'll smoke as many zips as I can find. But I ain't going to kill anybody. Turn a subject into an object. It's racism 101. Turn a subject into an object, and it makes them easier to destroy. From political parties to the immigrants in this country, documented or not, to the people in boats coming out of Venezuela. Jesus Christ, does this seem relevant today? You turn a subject into an object, and you can do anything to them. And why do so many humans on both sides, on all sides, allow themselves to be pawns in this kind of power game that are run by the privileged few? I recently revisited this movie, the 2005 film V for Vendetta. It was based on a graphic novel by Alan Moore and David Loy. You guys, anybody familiar with V for Vendetta? Yeah. The protagonist, V, he's wearing the Guy Fawkes mask. He's horribly abused and tortured by this fascist regime. But he breaks out and he rises up to wage his own personal revolution. Now, we can debate the politics of V for Vendetta, but I'm more interested in the fascist state that is portrayed. Natalie and I watched this again a few months back, and it was chilling how relevant it was, right? But I watched V for Vendetta when I was still a believer. This was 2004. And I was somewhat appalled by one line in the movie where V said, people shouldn't be afraid of their governments. Governments should be afraid of their people. And at the moment that I heard that, it just sounded wrong. It sounded like a betrayal, kind of unpatriotic, like anti-American, if I was to apply that to myself in these 50 states. But on my recent rewatch, I approached it from a very different angle and thought, yeah, people shouldn't be afraid of their governments. Governments should be afraid of their people. And I couldn't stop thinking about this guy, High Chancellor Adam Sutler, an amalgam of dictators throughout history, preaching a holy war narrative, demanding what? Absolute obedience. He would mete out Gestapo violence on all dissenters. He was an oligarch who controlled all the media, surveilled the entire population, and he promised national greatness and the crushing of the evil enemy, using terms like unity and faith that were linked to a cross symbol. Messages reinforced by the righteous slogan, England prevails, which rings a little bit like America first to me. So in the shadow of authoritarianism, V was the wrench in the works. He was the fly in the ointment. He was the kind of the spoiler, and his plan was radical. He wanted to blow up the symbol of the fascist regime, which was the Parliament building. Now, I'm not endorsing. I'm not endorsing like the surveillance state we live in. I'm not endorsing anything of the kind, right? I'm just drawing back to that line. Governments should be afraid of their people, the power of the people. In the film, there's this conveniently happy ending where the entire population of London, they all join together in lockstep, and they join V in a fearless and defiant stand against the man, and Sutler's dispatched, and everybody lives happily ever after kind of a thing, right? But he was the literal man who had puppeteered the whole damn system. One guy. And he could have been flicked out of that chancellor's chair in no time with just a little bit of pushback. And yet he remained an oppressor for so very long. The people had been lulled into a deep sleep or resignation, or maybe they were followers. They just wanted to be told what to think, told who to love, who to hate, what to do. Especially by those people who weaponize God speak. And people like to abuse the name of God to terrify people and then promise them restoration and greatness. King Henry VIII, he ushered in the divine right of kings. He invoked religion and God to establish himself as the head of the Church of England. My will is God's will. Cue the power consolidation, persecution of declared enemies, the rewriting of the laws, torture, execution, including the beheading of one of his own wives. But he was just one man. King Leopold II, second king of the Belgians. This was late 19th century. Responsible for all kinds of horrible stuff. Slavery, torture, kidnapping, the murder of millions of people. I can only imagine a scenario of all of those millions who had suffered under his reign, organizing and unifying at once to resist. They raised their humanity against his inhumanity. I know it's a fantasy. I know it's simple-minded. The machines of oppression have so many gears. I get it. I can't do a speech about authoritarianism without a reference to Adolf Hitler. There were several plots to take him out, resistors from within. But he was another tyrant who stoked terror and dehumanized and controlled, and he fabricated agencies for information. Have you guys seen who they stacked the White House press corps with lately? I mean, Matt Getz is in there going, wow, this is such a beautiful thing. And I think this is kind of what Hitler did, right? They had the Ministry of Propaganda. They had the people who had decided what truth truly is. 80 million Germans at the time. One man. My brain wrestles with the psychology of all of it. And I get it. The control of information, and I get how much of that information was partitioned and controlled, but still. Anybody see the 1988 John Carpenter movie, They Live? It's a pretty on-the-nose commentary about laissez-faire capitalism, oligarchy, manipulation through the media. We're really sheeple. So the idea is that you go through your entire life distracted and lulled and cold, and you don't even know it. The system does not want people to think and act for themselves. And yet, how much of our progress as human beings has only come from pushback? Resistance. Brave resistance, often messy or unpopular, even dangerous. Pain in the ass resistance, where the rising many defy the few. During the civil rights movement of the 50s and 60s, those in power said what? God wants us segregated. America first. You see that on the right? America first by the Klan. White America first is what they meant. But good people resisted against the shouts and the threats and the danger. They were defiant in the best sense of the word. They did not allow anyone else to strip them of their humanity, their quality, their personal authority. And with the landmark Supreme Court decision of 1954, Brown versus the Board of Education, segregation was declared unconstitutional. Yes, it was a high court that ruled, but it was everyday people who rallied together to change the zeitgeist and smash the barrier between minority children and their promising futures. Wasn't long ago that American men happily assumed authority over women. Yeah, I'll do the thinking around here, little lady. Yeah. I'll do the voting for us. Yeah. I represent us. I mean, even the founding fathers didn't let women into the halls of power. In their thinking, even though they accomplished amazing things, they were far from perfect. In their minds, patriarchy was patriotism. God's will, even according to the Bible. We all know the verse out of 1 Timothy, I do not allow a woman to teach or to have authority over a man. Instead, she is to remain quiet. But American women in the early 20th century said, hell no, they rose up and resisted. The brave activists of the suffrage movement organized and activated to fight that injustice. They demanded fairness, and they wanted to equalize the man's world, which resulted in the 19th Amendment to the United States Constitution in August of 1920. The right of citizens of the United States to vote shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or by any state on account of sex. Now, misogyny has not gone away, right, ladies? But 20th century women knocked down sexist barriers to the ballot box, barriers installed by authority. They knew their true power. Vets returning from the Vietnam War and protested. They were threatened and often physically assaulted, called the enemies of America, traitors to this country. The highest offices of government and their minions turned on our veterans, and yet they bravely marched on. Invoking God, famous religious bigot Jerry Falwell and people like him, like Anita Bryant and others, famously said gay people were dangerous reprobates. They wanted a modern-day Sodom and Gomorrah. Of course, it was Falwell that blamed gay people for the AIDS crisis, among other things, right? Homosexuals have long been blamed for everything, from pedophilia to AIDS to the attacks of 9/11. That was Falwell, too, and Jerry Robertson. Those in power said that society didn't have any obligation to serve non-heteros. You want health care? You want a job? You want to get married? Would you like us to bake you a cake? Sorry. You don't have that right. We do. You don't. Yet millions of good people stood together and formed a resistance. And they continue to stand up for LGBT equality today, gender equality, racial equality. That resistance is happening on a moment-by-moment basis in pods across this country every hour of every day. Women across the Middle East have put their lives on the line against Islamic oppressors. Islamist nations want to dehumanize women, subjugate them to men. They want them covered, whether it's their whole face, their hair, everything but the eyes. Did you know that in places like Saudi Arabia, if a case goes to court, you need 2 female witnesses on the stand for every 1 man to equalize it out, because a woman's voice is worth half as much. They're having acid thrown in their faces. They're being beaten with canes. They're being imprisoned. They're being disappeared. And yet they say, fine, you can arrest us, you can torture us, you can even kill us, but you do not own us. And they're ripping the veil off of their heads, and they are rallying and protesting in the streets across Iran right now. Hashtag Iran Revolution. Remarkable courage for a cause that deserves a lot more recognition in the West. Anybody here go to the recent No Kings protest? I was out. Oh, yeah. Solidarity, my friends, solidarity. Did you guys get your George Soros checks yet? I've been looking in the mailbox. I keep waiting for. Can you believe how irredeemably stupid that conspiracy theory is? Did you see that the estimate? I'm just digressing here. Did you see the estimate? At first they said it was about 7 million people, but the newer estimates came out and said it may have been 3 times as many people. 8% of the country may have been out there. Do people on Fox News have any idea of the magnitude of the cover-up that would have to happen to hide 20 million Soros checks and their deposits? And we need a national IQ test, my friends. But those No Kings protests sent a message, didn't they? I mean, we get frustrated because we'd like to see more accomplished, but don't tell me these people aren't seeing more and more of us in the streets and having an oh shit moment. And I don't know about you, but I don't want to look back in a couple of years and say I stood in my living room doing nothing. I want to be out there. I want to be able to say we were there. Cruelty is a cancer. That's a great message. Let's spread it. We're not a dictatorship. That's a great message. Let's spread it. Love, not hate. For the crime of dissent at No Kings, we were called by our own Speaker of the House a hate America movement. And yet, what is more patriotic? What is more about love of seeing the best ideas of your country manifested? What's more patriotic than that? I released this speech. It was called Dissent is Our Duty. This came out last year. And I mean dissent overall. Overall, not just about government, not just about authoritarians on the macro stage. I mean this. I know there are people in this room who came out of a controlling family or are still navigating one today. And I can tell because it's the holidays, because half of you just slumped down in your chair. Are we even going to bother with Thanksgiving this year? Honey, I don't think I can do it. If they roll their eyes at me one more time, I'm flinging the mashed potatoes all the way across the table in their face because screw those people. Oh, come on, it'll be better this time. I don't know what I'm going to do. Blah, 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 blah. How many people, though, have had someone else who was a parent, a sibling, a spouse, a cousin, somebody who was in your bloodline say, well, I'm your family. My parents used to say, we didn't raise you this way. Right? What they're saying is, we raised you so we'll define you. And so when you say, no, I'm not a robot, and I'm not you, I'm an individual, I'm going to take this journey, I'm on a path, and I deserve the respect to take that path on my own terms. I appreciate some counsel, I'll ask for it, but I'm not going to be you, I'm going to be me. You chose to listen to yourself. Pastors and priests, they claim authority, right? God gave me the authority over you. Have you guys seen the horrors of church discipline when somebody inside the church commits a supposed moral infraction? They drag him up in front of the pastor and the deacons and the congregants, and they make them confess and pray, and then, call everybody every 5 minutes to tell them that they're living more holy, and they've just surrendered their own authority to a higher authority with a capital A. And a lot of people busted out and they said, hell no, you're not going to do that to me. It's massively inappropriate, it's cruel, it's stupid, and you don't get to do that to me. You chose to listen to yourself. Nationalists said, line up or get out. America, love it or leave it, meaning agree with what we do as a government or extricate yourself. That's the word I'm looking for. Love of the motherland. Salute. Pledge your absolute allegiance. Protest is treason. But you stay and fight because it's right and because you love your nation. There is such power in organizing and recognizing our own valid voices to say someone else can't govern and manipulate us. I think that's remarkable. You can throw Bible verses at me all you want. You can throw a tantrum all you want. You can raise your voice. You can claim kingship. You can demand all you want. You know what? I'm me. I'm going to make this journey on my own terms. My tribe's the human tribe. My convictions are my own, and my allegiance is there, not to you. That's remarkably liberating, no matter how hard it gets. And I'll bet everybody in this room has a story of some kind about breaking out of a high control situation. And it was scary, and it was disruptive, and it was difficult. But despite the challenges, you did it anyway. And for doing so, you are my hero. Imagine if everybody could be so free. Which brings me back to where I started. Something in our history books, a human moment in an inhumane situation. That war story about love. Okay, finally I'm going to tell you the story. This little micro event is not, I'm not commenting on, I'm not saying World War I was not necessary, right? We understand that the stand against tyranny often requires conflict, bloody conflict. It's just an inevitability, right? But I want to show you what happened on one tiny occasion on a night, December 1914, when everyday soldiers stepped outside of that shadow of authority. World War I, it began in July of 1914. France, Russia, Britain, the U.S., and eventually Italy were joining forces against Italy, Austria, Germany, Hungary, Bulgaria, and the Ottoman Empire. That conflict, of course, went on for 4 years. The Western Front was a line of trench warfare, and it stretched between the English Channel in the north to the Swiss Alps in the south. We're talking about 475 miles of trench running through much of Belgium and northern France. Trench warfare brought its own special brand of suffering. The Western Front, of course, has been the subject of so much media, history books, fiction books, documentary films and TV series, etc. I mean, the Western Front, right? Opposing armies dig in like ticks. They're shielded by sandbags and barbed wire. They attack, they counterattack, they move forward a few feet, they move backward a few feet, desperate to find some way to advance somehow. And the space between them, of course, is known as no man's land. Those trenches, filled with cold mud, wet cigarettes, you're sleeping upright against a side wall because you couldn't lay down. There were 2 to 3 feet of water down there. The risk of trench foot might cost you an amputated limb. Combat above the trenches was a meat grinder. It is easy to see why so many of these exchanges resulted in long, long, long stalemates. Exhausting physically, exhausting emotionally. Christmas Eve, 1914. The war was only 5 months old. Many people thought it was going to be over. And initially, they thought the war was going to be a piece of cake. And this was the time when they'd seen hundreds of thousands already dead. And they were thinking, oh, my God, maybe we're in this for the long haul. Will there ever be an end? But they're down there in the Western Front. There's a 30-mile stretch of trench controlled by the British Expeditionary Force. So, on both sides, we see the people in their trenches. Morale literally below ground. There was a guy named Bruce Bairnsfather. He was an Allied captain and a machine gunner. After the war, he would go on to become a cartoonist and a journalist and an author. And he was down there with his fellow soldiers, shivering and miserable in the muck on a Christmas Eve. And he chronicled what happened next. Around 10 o'clock at night, Allied soldiers heard a noise coming from the opposing trench. They didn't recognize what it was at first. They were like, what is that? What is that? And then all of a sudden they realized it was the sound of singing. The enemy soldiers were singing Christmas carols on Christmas Eve. Who knows what song it was? Deck the Halls, or Silent Night, Hark the Herald Angels Sing, whatever. And in a magical moment, the British soldiers joined in and began to sing right along with them. Opposing armies with hundreds of feet between them were unified in music. Captain Bairnsfather would chronicle that night in these words, and I quote, "A German soldiers shouted out, 'Come over, come join us.' A British soldier responded, 'I'm not going over there. You come halfway and we'll come halfway.' And that's exactly what happened next. A Christmas miracle. The armies of both sides got out of their trenches. They walked into no man's land and they shook hands in peace. Not as enemies, but as men who had suddenly been united in song. What an incredible moment that must have been. No shouts and anger, no bullets, no bombs, just warm smiles and goodwill. Bairnsfather wrote the words, "There was not an atom of hate on either side." Another British soldier, a guy named John Ferguson, he wrote, "Here we were laughing and chatting to men whom only a few hours before we were trying to kill." Men did their best to talk to each other through the language barrier. They exchanged cigarettes, bottles of liquor, and they showed photographs of their families back home. They asked about things like sports teams. Speaking of sports, in some places, camps on both sides organized impromptu soccer matches with up to 100 soldiers out there in no man's land kicking the ball around together. Each side allowed the other side to collect their dead in an atmosphere of reverence and respect, honoring those who had fallen by giving them some chance of proper burial and remembrance. These men, in those seconds, were not acting under authority, unless you count the authority that they gave to themselves. The permission to be a human being first. I'm reminded of the Lennon song, which is the one we all know, Imagine, right? Imagine there's no countries. It isn't hard to do, nothing to kill or die for, and no religion too. And this phenomenon wasn't just happening in that 130-mile stretch. It was happening in other places across the Western and in parts of the Eastern Front. The divided suddenly and magically united until commanders on both sides heard what was going on, and they were furious. They demanded the men immediately separate and return to fighting each other. They say, if you do anything like this again, there will be consequences. German soldiers would be executed, British soldiers court-martialed. But even then, after that, many soldiers they could not open fire on the people they had befriended just a few minutes before, and they would ultimately get replaced. Sadly, many more did re-engage under the umbrella of authority and declared war on each other, returning to their lines, and again waged war against those they had befriended only moments before in the meat grinder of World War I. I can't even imagine. There are memorials to that day. This one's in Staffordshire, England. It's an effigy to the handshakes on the battlefield. Here's one in Belgium. You can see there's a soccer ball between them. Two soldiers shaking hands on Christmas Eve. Peace on earth, goodwill toward men. Goodwill toward everyone. I want to finish today by quoting one of the great writers and thinkers of the 19th century. I'm a big fan of Robert Greene Ingersoll. And he wrote back in 1884, he wrote these words. He said, "Love is the only bow on life's dark cloud. It is the morning and the evening star. It shines upon the babe and sheds its radiance upon the quiet tomb. It is the mother of art, inspirer of poet, patriot, and philosopher. It is the air and light of every heart, builder of every home, kindler of every fire on every hearth. It was the first to dream of immortality. It fills the world with melody, for music is the voice of love. Love is the magician, the enchanter that changes worthless things to joy and makes royal kings and queens of common clay. It is the perfume of that wondrous flower, the heart. And without that sacred passion, that divine swoon, we are less than beasts. But with it, earth is heaven, and we are gods." You and I care about all these things because it matters. We try to love because it's right and it's good. We resist because we must. Our yesterday and today have shown us the power that we have, the potential that we have. When we see each other as fragile, beautiful, precious travelers in this world, and we refuse to let anyone, anywhere tear us away from our hearts, our values, our convictions, and each other. And that's my presentation today. Thank you so much for being here. Encore. You guys have time to do a little interaction? You guys want to talk to each other? You need a break? You want to run screaming from the room? Get your money back? No? I'm going to give the handheld to you and switch to here, if I may.
Thank you. Check 1, 2. Can you guys hear me? Okay, I guess we'll just go random, show of hands. Anybody want to chime in? You're not hurting my feelings. If you have somewhere to go, just wave and smile.
Good.
Thank you for being here tonight. It's been an honor.
Please,
Really
please
enjoyed
wait
having
for
you.
the microphone and so everyone can hear your questions.
Thanks, Seth. That was great. I've got something because it's related. I volunteer at History Colorado leading school tours for elementary school kids. One of our exhibits is on the Sand Creek Massacre, the anniversary of which was just a week ago on November 29th. The reason I bring it up is twofold. One is about the severe tribalism. The territorial governor at the time, John Evans, and the Rocky Mountain News publisher, William Byers, were adamant that there had to be a removal of all the native indigenous peoples in Colorado before they could become a state. So that was one of their main emphasis. Rocky Mountain News started publishing articles about how the Cheyenne and Arapaho people were going to attack Denver, scalp everybody, burn it to the ground. And then they raised this volunteer regiment for 100 days. to basically eliminate the Indians. And one of the things on the poster said that they will be entitled to all horses and other plunder taken from the Indians. It basically was a vigilante mob. So when the time came to attack, they did it thinking they were just savages, because that's how they've been treated, as just savages. The other reason I bring this up is when you talked about the war and empathy. It would not have been known that that was a massacre, because Chivington, who led the regiment that did the attack, came marching back into Denver saying this was a great victory over the savages. But there was a soldier there, Captain Silas Sewell, who was part of another regiment, but he had been dragged along by Chivington because he didn't trust him and thought he might warn the Cheyenne and Arapaho. Sewell told his company, stand down, you do not fire, you do not shoot. This is a massacre, not a battle. 230 plus, mainly women, children, and the elders were killed at that massacre. Sewell came back, wrote a letter that got to the War Department and Congress and said this was a massacre. They agreed, and they said this was not a battle, this was a massacre. It was only because one man, Silas Sewell, stood up. The Arapaho and Cheyenne honor Silas Sewell today. On the anniversary, not only do they go to Sand Creek to honor there, they also visit Silas Sewell's grave in the cemetery to honor him. In the exhibit at History Colorado, there's a plaque honoring him and what he did for them. Silas Sewell was assassinated 6 months after the battle on the streets of Denver, most likely by people who were involved in that.
You know, you talk about the vigilantes. Anybody else get shades of ice when he was talking about that?
And that's why I bring it up, because that's when I asked them. One of the things I asked the kids, why do we study history? And this year, it's amazing, because as I've done this in years past, it's always that we can learn about the past, we can do this. This year, more often than not, the first answer I get, so we can learn from it. So I have hope if these fourth graders are able to see that.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Anybody in the room think there's going to be a pendulum swing? You think we're going to hit a point of critical mass and there's going to be a course correction? Go ahead.
Hi.
Hi.
Thank you. That was interesting. I guess, so that picture that you kept showing, where it's showing the one guy and then all the people, and you're saying the people don't know their power. I think I'm having a hard time understanding how that is the conclusion that gets reached, rather than those people absolutely know their power and they exert it to hold those other people up. Like,
No, I think that's fair.
because right now it feels like there are definitely people who are sort of stepping off the plank, so to speak, in their support. And then there are the other people who are like doubling down. And so and then you mentioned the civil rights movement, the boycotts, the sit-ins, the economic consequences are probably the primary reason that we actually got to be treated like people. And so I guess it's hard.
No, I can hear you. You're good.
Hard for me to understand, like,
Go ahead.
how do you conclude that they don't know better, or they don't know their power, rather than, no, they absolutely know, and it's up to the other people to exert their power. I feel like the tribalism thing almost says, like, don't look at it that way.
Sorry, I'm wearing a sweater and it's a little warm in here, so I look like that guy on broadcast news when Albert Brooks was doing, so I'm starting to sweat a little bit. This is full contact presentation right here. Don't try this at home. I think it is nuanced, and I appreciate that very much. I agree that there is a culture in the millions of people who have not only enabled but celebrate today's white supremacist, white nationalist, Trumpian cult, the oligarchy, the takeover, the overt bigotry, the xenophobia. You're right. I think about the people who gave up and stayed home. 100 million people, registered voters, didn't even show up to freaking check a box, right? I'm talking about a lot of people who opt out because they don't recognize that there is something that can be done. And, some people say peaceful protest doesn't work. I think that's total bullshit. I think, for everything from Selma to watching Jimmy Kimmel get dismissed, and everybody says, fuck you, Disney, and they cancel, and then Disney has to come back 4 days later and say, hey, wow, sorry about that, right? And I still haven't resubscribed. And that is an example of the economic consequence. Perhaps it is a bit reductive, and it is certainly a bit romantic the way that I deal with it. But I do see a lot of people who simply don't recognize that they're not an oligarch. They don't have $500 billion. They're not one of the 6 companies that own all the media companies all the media in this nation. They don't have the billion-dollar military complex, but they do have power. And I do think that resistance to that power, even when it risks life and limb, I think those resistances have resulted in societal zeitgeist changes in our country and around the world. But I totally take your point, and I receive that, and I think maybe I'm wrong, or maybe I am reductive about it. But thank you for that. I appreciate it. Anybody else?
So, dude, I'm kind of new to the secular club.
Is it working? I'd like everyone to be able to hear the sound of your voice, so it's not
Okay,
just
is it
me.
working? Is it working now?
Yeah, you're doing great.
Okay. So I'm kind of new to the secular club, and I'm not well versed in the Bible, but I know that there we go. You had some examples of like good Christians, and I agree with like those people. They're doing a lot of good and stuff like that. But some things in the Bible just, and I'm not like sure which one, like which testament, which like version, but they just like say bad things, and if like there are religious people who take that Bible to be like the Bible, how can you pass off those people as like truly good, I guess, if they believe in a book that has truly hateful, some aspects of it are truly hateful?
Well, when I was a Bible-believing Christian, was I evil? Was I a monster? I don't think so. I was a victim of bad ideas. I had either ignored or written off or justified several parts of my Bible. Did I have some real bigoted ideas? Absolutely. But people really make a Jesus in their own image, don't they? So the people I'm talking about, their Jesus would never judge anyone. Their Jesus believes no person should be illegal. Their Jesus would have an open tent. They've gone through the Bible to pick all the good stuff out. Those people have created a Jesus or a religion in their own image. But just as I say the Christian nationalists are true Christians, the Westboro Baptist Church are true Christians, I'm not one to say that people who worship a Jesus and have sort of cherry-picked the Bible or said it's not a religion, a relationship, are not true Christians. They identify as Christians, fine. They say they believe in Jesus, fine. They think they're going to go to heaven, okay, fine. They're Christian. But they are not the same as the people who are like John Hagee and those types who are throwing bigoted verses at us and weaponizing God to divide, splinter, dehumanize, and even kill. And, they're about love. And so in that sense, we may disagree on theology, but we share values. And that's how I frame it. And I know it's a hot button. A lot of atheists start to twitch a little bit. I've had a few call the show, and they're like, come on. First of all, it's anyone who believes the Bible has to hold, they support slavery and the execution of children and all the horrible commandments and the creation and the implementation of hell and the crazy mythology. So they're either stupid or they're bigots. But I don't think the Bible works like that. I think for most Christians, the Bible is like the terms of service. They scroll to the bottom and click I agree. Right? They scroll to the bottom and say, I agree. But they're still Christians. They're just a different flavor of Christian. Anybody else? You saving that one? You saving that one? I stole it myself. Just take it. Just take it.
All right. Well, thank you. I figured I would kind of follow your prompt and interact a little bit with other people and the prompts that they've had. And I can tell you that for myself, coming from one of the high control groups that you mentioned and coming from that background, I have a lot of family and friends that are still members and that are still part of a group that I do consider a hateful group and a group that I consider a group that does bad things. But they are some of the most kind and generous and good people that I know, that I've met. And I think that it's just complicated and it's nuanced. And humans are messy. We are good. We are bad. We are a mix.
Yeah.
And I think that we can't just put people in a bucket and say they're different from me and so they're bad because they believe some bad things. I am sure that I do things that harm people unnecessarily, unintentionally. I'm sure that we all do, and I just think we need to look for that humanity, look for those moments of peace and agreement, and build from there.
And if I may, I have cut people off. I mean, I especially post 2024. Yeah, right? If you are an agent of active harm against the people and causes I care about, we're not going to break bread together. If you are, okay, thank you. I needed that validation because it's hard, right? You are an active agent of harm against the people and causes I care about. You're not my tribe. Natalie and I say, you're not our people. Was it Val who came up with root people? A friend of ours, Valerie, we were sitting at a table and she said, there are people in your life that you know and you associate with, but you have very few root people. The people who are roots deep, there, thick and thin, who get you, who support you, who are family in every sense of the word, root people. And I think we're all thinking of someone right now who is or isn't that. And when I hear, somebody who is part of the machine of oppression that's going on, who is not an egalitarian, who is using the Bible to justify bigotry and all of these horrible things, whether it's Netanyahu or whether it's ICE and the immigrants or whether it's vilifying non-Christians like me, etc., I'm like, you're not my people. You're certainly not my root people. And I don't want to break bread with you. I don't want to be in the room with you. So I have drawn hard lines. But something that you said resonates with me, that it's messy and it's situational. And I think maybe that's the message I'm trying to say, is that you can't put 8 billion people in a box. You can't put 2.3 billion Christians in a box. I think you have to go and you say, well, who are you? What are you about? What's your personality? What are your value systems? What do you hold most dear? Who do you love? Who do you hate? What are you and who are you? And once you know that, you can begin to make better decisions about how to approach them individually as a human being. But that's a case-by-case thing. It's hard. It requires commitment. And a lot of people want lazy, and they want binary, and they want it pat and easy, and life just doesn't work that way. And I've had to learn that. It's a skill I'm still working on. Case by case, person by person. We may disagree about whether there's a God, but do we share values when it comes to people? That's the one I'm most interested in. We can talk about the rest over coffee once we've defeated the authoritarians, right? Anybody else? Yeah.
Seth, I want to thank you for coming back here. Last time you were here, I got 2 of your books. I read them. I loved them.
Oh.
I want to thank you for helping me to be a better person with what you talk about. And you really reminded me today, all those religious people from my past, they're all still Christians. And I have had a tendency to kind of look down my nose a little bit at them. Haven't you woken up? And thank you for reminding me that that's not really the way to look at it. So thank you.
You're very kind. Thank
You're making me a better person.
Thank you for those kind words. Thank you. I beat myself up. It took me 30 years to figure out a donkey didn't speak Hebrew. Maybe I was a little thick, right? But I don't think we're going to insult people into an epiphany. You're an idiot, right? Even my book, Christianity Made Me Talk Like an Idiot, even if you read the back cover, it talks about how religion distorts things so that smart people can say and do things that make them sound ridiculous. But if you peel back the layer, so often you find out that intelligence and religion often, you will find that it's not the most intelligent who are always atheists. A lot of times it's the most intelligent who are the most clever at rationalizing the irrational. They're the best at creating the patterns and connecting dots that were never meant to be connected, which is why we will see people who are PhDs and experts in their fields who are still religious. I just interviewed Ken Miller, world-renowned biologist, who is a frontline educator in his field, and a fierce proponent for evolutionary education in American schools. He's a Catholic. He's Catholic. So I had him on the show, and I'm like, I got to ask you a couple of Catholic questions, buddy. I mean, right? Let's talk about the church, right? But more interesting to me was the fact that he and I, other than the fact that he identified as a Catholic, sounded like the same person. We had the same vibe, same thing, pro-science, pro-humanity. He was pro-trans. Okay, yeah, we can talk about how you got there. But I'm more of a fan of what's already in here. So, but you're very kind. And just know that you did most of the heavy lifting, right? I mean, I'm just the cheerleader. I'm the guy with the pom-poms, right? But you're the one who had come to a fork in the road. You're the one who has been trying to navigate a very difficult world. I'll bet there's been some harm done to you by religious people. And that's totally valid. And if you feel pain from that, and you feel resentment from that, and you want to distance people for that, I think that's valid. Every step you take is yours to take on your own terms. And every step you take, you should give yourself credit for having the courage to do so, because so many people never get there. And in that way, you inspire me. So thank you.
Thank you, Seth, for your presentation.
Is there a button there?
Thank you for your presentation, Seth. I'm just curious if you have anything to say about what's going on at the University of Oklahoma currently. And maybe, I don't know if everybody knows what's going on.
Anybody not know this story? So the short version of the long story is that there was a psychology student at Oklahoma University who was part of a class that was taught by a transgender professor. And the paper was talking about gender. And the student submitted a paper with no citations except references to demons. Okay? I saw the PDF of it, and I was going through it, and there's no sourcing. There's really almost no arguing. It's, I think, well, I don't know, I don't feel that way myself. It was almost like you were talking to someone over coffee and they were making a completely emotional argument, and then she pulls out, they may be demon possessed. So it was essentially, she had submitted an unsourced opinion paper in a science class, and the teacher gave her an F. Well, she almost immediately contacted the governor, which is what you do when you fail a test. That's what you do when you fail a test. You reach out to the governor. Don't tell me she had not planned this. So, the teacher is put on suspension by Oklahoma University for potentially violating the religious liberties of the student. Apparently, the teacher that consulted another teacher before she issued the grade, apparently that second teacher has been penalized and put on paid leave as well. And the student that submitted the F paper, leaning into mythology, talking about demons when it comes to gender, she was given an award by one of the, I forget what district he's in, but he's a politician in the state of Oklahoma who recognized her by having a certificate made apparently just for her. It's kind of like that Peace Prize that Donald Trump just made for himself. The FIFA Peace Prize, the participation trophy that they gave him, and he immediately wrapped around. It's the same thing. And I was telling somebody, was I talking about it on the podcast? I think she's been maneuvering since day one. I would not be surprised if she ends up with a plum job at Fox News or at Turning Point USA by the end of the month, right? We are talking. God, you got me going. We are talking about the most privileged demographic in this country, right? White bread, corn-fed, conservative Christian, evangelical America. I have never seen a group that is so desperate to be persecuted. Everywhere you go, they're persecuting me. They're persecuting me. Somebody said happy holidays to me. Holy shnikes, how would you ever survive, right? you guys seen those War on Christmas posters? Join today for the War on Christmas. What's the War on Christmas? There are 11 separate holidays in the months between November and January. Some people just say happy holidays as a genuine goodwill. It doesn't cost anybody anything. And if you say Merry Christmas right back, I say Merry Christmas to you. It's the name of the holiday. It is the biggest non-thing on the planet. But every December, Fox News pulls out the persecution card, right? We see this with everything. Who's going to use a certain bathroom? I mean, if you can tell how sex-obsessed conservatives are, because you and I are thinking, I got to pee. They're thinking, someone wants to have sex with me in the stall. They are sex-obsessed. And that's exactly what is happening in OU, and I do expect her to play this card probably into $1 million gig with TPUSA before the end of the month. That's just a guess. Anybody else? We'll do a couple more and I'll let you guys go. I know you've been very generous with your time. Please, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks for everything. It's been like a lot of fun to listen to you in person.
Thank you.
So a lot of your themes are on othering and isolation and dehumanization. And I know that the more time you spend specifically in the room with other people and people who are not like you is very beneficial to pull you toward the center and to build relationships and to see other people as human. At the same time, decline in community engagement and third spaces has been happening for decades, and this was accelerated by the COVID pandemic. People don't go bowling anymore, you know, like the Lions, they're all white-haired at this point. Club attendance is in the toilet. So we're not going out to spend time with people to engage in ways that would make us all feel like humans to each other. What advice do you have to get people to get the hell out of the house and to meet up things like this on a more regular basis? And whether that's in real space or in virtual space, but I think real community is so important, and I think that we're walking away from it and losing the spaces where we can hold it.
My experience may be a little different than yours. Maybe it's geographical, but I think people are still filling Bronco Stadium. You know, I think people are still going to concerts. We just saw Paul McCartney. You know, it's packed out to be okay. I think people are still, you know, people are rallying post-COVID, at least in my circle. We have seen a decline in church attendance. A lot of the people who didn't go when they had the excuse kind of didn't go back when it was all over. Now, mega churches have spiked a little bit, and that's interesting. I released a podcast interview about this recently. How do we fix the community space has always been a challenge with free thought groups because we are herding cats. Would you agree? Yes. We are pains in the ass. We are going in a ton of different directions. We're difficult to manage. The thing that makes us amazing is sometimes the thing that makes us frustrating. We're all very strong personalities, and it's hard to rally us together in many, many cases. A lot of people don't need it. Some people came out of a high-control church, and they simply are resistant because they've been so harmed, so scarred, that they're hesitant to latch on to another group, another tribe, and you are my people, you're my tribe. They're hesitant to do that because they have been burned. And that's totally valid. I get that. I think the first thing that I like to do is to try to encourage people that today was not atheist or secular church, which is the first thing they want to say. Hey, where are you going tonight? Oh, we're going to hear Seth speak. Oh, secular church. Nah, yeah. People did this kind of thing long before there were churches. And you can get the same shit from non-religious stuff that you do get in the church. You can get the same goosebumps and the endorphins going and the bonding agents and the body chemistry from a good concert, communal music, singing together in an auditorium that you get in a church. You can visit somebody in the hospital outside of religious dogma. You can speak words of kindness. You can give to charity. You can help the homeless. You can work for some sort of a cause over the holiday season. Religion may do it well, but it doesn't own that. And so my first line of defense is to try to de-religify community and say that this is a human thing. And there's no need to apologize for it. There's no need to be self-conscious about it. The second thing I try to do is I try to encourage people that we have to be aware that we are sometimes so strongly opinionated that we stumble on the pebbles when we're running the race. It's amazing the stuff people fight over. And then a free thought group will splinter, and then they'll splinter, and then they'll vaporize, and then there will be nothing until someone tries again in 10 years. And I always try to encourage people to say that, case by case, de-escalation is hard for activists. Is it hard for you? Because it's hard for me sometimes. But I think to be able to find ways through productive conflict resolution is a challenge, I think, for communities, tribes across the board. We see it in the church and we see it out of the church. But de-religifying and also looking for opportunities to constructively problem solve, I call it constructive conflict, is a challenge, and it's a challenge with us. We're all meat-covered skeletons. We're all evolved primates. We can all be emotional creatures. We're people of strong conviction, and if something pushes our buttons, we can go hard, and before you know it, everybody stomped off, and they took their ball and went home. But at the end of the day, it's always better to see us build bridges than burn them, and that is possible, but sometimes I think we need tool sets to be able to do that. At the end of the day, though, I hope all of you are encouraged by the people you see in this room. I'm encouraged by you. I spend most of my time in a room with a microphone. I got 2 little dogs at my feet and a cat, yowling somewhere down in the living room. And, Natalie, she's somewhere, and whether she's home or from work or whether she's there. But to be able to get out and be among my people, and this is the best incarnation of the tribe. I've lost family members. I don't have relationships with some family members. I don't feel accepted, respected. You realize how conditional love is when you start doing things that make other people uncomfortable, don't you? You start to say things that they disagree with, and you realize that, they loved me, but only if I validated them. Coming out of a high control situation and being vocal about it is actually a black light, isn't it? It shows you where the problems are, and it shows you the people who said they were on your side who may not always have been, and it reveals people who were there that you may not have seen before. I know in this room, just like tonight, I will get challenged. I get people with strong opinions, disagreeing ideas, challenging me. Great! I will get people who will wrap their arms around me. Hell, I walked in, I was hugged so much I hardly was able to go get to the dressing room and change clothes, and I'm in. I'm in on that. To be able to have that type of tribe, family, community, humanity together, it feeds me as much as anybody. And that's why it's such an honor to be asked back by Secular Hub. So, for all the kind words you guys throw in my direction, know how much it means to me that you are here, that you are kind of a light in this crazy and often cruel world, this superstitious world, that you are taking hard stands in your own circumstances, often at great cost, that you are living on your terms without apology. In that way, you inspire me. And I think on your level, local level, person to person, case by case, from neighborhood to neighborhood, rippling outward, you are a big part of how we are going to fix the world. And you inspire me, and I'm inspired by you. So thank you so much again for coming tonight, and I appreciate you very much.